Hello, and welcome to the Simply Business Interview Podcast, a podcast created by business owners for business owners. I am your host, John Jennings. And I believe that most business owners are working way too hard for much too little. And one of our issues is that we overcomplexify things. I believe the answers are almost always within us or within our reach. I like to say that I'm a simple man with simple ideas. So welcome to Simply Business. All right, today I'm really excited to be joined by someone who's very well known here in the Louisville entrepreneurial community. I've known Landon for a number of years. Landon Wade, who's the owner of Goodson Clothing and Supply Co. Just really excited to hear his story, more about it. I know you'll want to hear it too. So, Landon, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me, John. I appreciate it. I'm not a native Louisvillian. That's one thing I always say. I'm originally from Ohio.
We won't hold that against you.
What's that?
We won't hold that against you this time.
No doubt. Yeah. Moved here, hard to believe, 12 years ago, and worked for my father for a couple of years. And then I've been in this business, the Goodson Clothing and Supply, for about 10 years. So we help companies choose the right branded clothing and promotional supplies to better engage their employees and customers. I guess the only other thing I'd say, the day and age we live in is a pretty noisy industry that we're in. The branded clothing and promotional item space, very competitive.
Yeah.
But we always say that it's chaos, and we're here to try to bring order to the chaos.
So what did you do before that prepared you for this role?
Well, I mean, I was a part owner of the business I was in with my father. So I've been in this industry, if you will, for, gosh, that's 2003 or four. So
okay,
22 years, which is mind-boggling. And I was a minority owner in that business. My dad was the majority owner, and worked there until 2015. So I moved here in 2013, worked for that business for 2 years, was traveling back and forth to Ohio for my role there. And then through a series of events that would require us to have a bourbon to discuss, we'll leave it at that. But it became clear that I needed to move on and do my own thing. And I did that. And so I guess, the answer to that question is, the experience that I had as a part owner of that business, a lot of that transferred over. Then, when you're young and you think you got all the answers, and you think I'm going to go out and do it on my own. And I did. And I was right about some things, and I was wrong about a lot of things.
Well, we'll talk about some of those. So I've always wondered about the name. Is the name Goodson because you're a good son and you left your father's business and started your own?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has a tie-in to my, story, my personal story. It's, the way that I would say it is, certainly from a marketing standpoint, we tried to create a brand that was very different than anything in our space. We wanted to create a brand that kind of, if everybody's familiar with Clayton and Croom, it's sort of like, it's kind of that same feel, leathers, woods, vintage. And Hugh Goodson is a character that we're able to tell our brand story through. On the personal side, there's definitely a tie-in to sort of, I would say, just my quest to be a good son across the board. I mean, I have a faith base, a Christian faith base. And so, it's sort of like my desire to be a good son to my heavenly father, to my earthly father, every day. And it's, so it's kind of a reminder of that each day.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. It was one of those things that hit me as we were talking before about just your, the name of the company, how to introduce you, and I wonder where that came from, and then that resonates. I like that.
Yeah.
I love it when a name has a good story behind it. I'm never that creative with names. Always, that's one thing I've always struggled with. So what was the impetus behind doing? I mean, you said I don't want to go into the whole what requires a bourbon, but what was really the thing that made you really want to be the joys of being a business owner, of worrying about putting a paycheck in everybody's hands and all that. People often don't realize how much stress and everything there is on the business owner. But you knew that obviously because you had seen that in your own family. So what was the impetus behind that?
You know, I think, I mean, sometimes I think, there's just, at the beginning, there's just a desire. You want to go be successful, and a lot of times that's, you want to be respected, admired, you want to be financially successful or whatever. And, so you go out, you hang your shingle and you go out, and then as the thing grows, it is stressful. I've never been a person that plays well with others, so to speak. I'm not a great employee necessarily, because and I know that that's cliche a little bit and common of people who tend to start businesses, but you know, and I think I just kind of had a very strong opinions, especially when I was younger, about how things should be
Hmm.
done, and I went out and did it. And then as you grow it, you find yourself needing help, and so it's sort of like you just kind of like knock down one thing at a time, and then before you know it, you're like, okay, well now I've got this thing with multiple people. And I just mentioned to you we moved to a new office, so I'm dealing with a lease, and today I'm on the phone with LG&E trying to set up our utility. But all the different things that come along with it, you sort of just knock those
Right.
down as you go, and then before long you look back and you're like, wow, this is like a
It's
thing
a
now.
real thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So how many people are on your team now?
So between direct employees, contractors, we have about 12 people that we kind
Yeah,
of touch and work with each day. Yeah.
that's a team. So
Yeah.
you get past. Well, we say once you get past like a partnership, two or three people, you suddenly get
Yeah.
a plethora of personalities and issues and everything else.
Yeah.
Uh, so you're 10 years in. What what was that? What was the first that aha moment or that first big wow, this is gonna be real. This is this thing's gonna
Yeah.
this isn't a hobby anymore. This is a company. What was that first moment like?
Yeah, that's a great question. When it became clear I kind of needed to transition and do my own thing, I started at my dining room table and then went to, kind of an external office. And then the office we came from before we came where we're at now, I really had one office when I moved over there. Just, I mean, literally a buddy of mine helped me pick my stuff up out, into his pickup truck. And we went over and I set up, and then that was, almost 10 years ago. So, and it was just kind of like, we just expanded our footprint in that space, needed another room, need another person, need another room. Before long, and it just happened that the space was available. And before long, you had a good bit of the space,
Hmm.
and I think probably, for me, COVID I know it's a turning point for everybody, but during COVID, I was down to two people. So that was 5 years ago. It was just two of us. And literally to this day, I remember we sat on the back porch of my house, Brett Kavanaugh and myself, not the honorable, not the judge. You if you want to burn 15 minutes, Google Brett Kavanaugh, and with Goodson, you'll find some videos. It was an interesting time for him because he tweeted this thing out that said it's a terrible time to be named Brett Kavanaugh, and it went viral, and he did interviews. Whatever.
Oh
Anyway,
wow, that's
but
funny.
not the judge. Brett and I sat on the back porch and said, "Hey, it's COVID. Things are crazy. Like, we're in a very competitive space. Both of us are really pretty capable salespeople, business development people. So, what, you know, does this business need to exist essentially? And if it doesn't, then let's just go get jobs." And we looked at each other and said, no, we feel strongly enough about what we're trying to do that's different, that it needs to exist. And so then we said, well, if that's the case, then we need to double down on some things and really go forward. And that, I would say, that was a turning point where we knew, hey, this wasn't a hobby. This was a thing that we felt strongly needed to be here. And if that was going to be the case, then we needed to get serious about some things and make some changes. And we did. And one of
Yeah.
those was marketing. We really doubled down on a lot of marketing, did kind of a brand refresh, expanded the base of the brand, things like that.
Hmm. Awesome. I love that story. That's great. And that was 5 years in. I mean, a lot of people
Yeah,
think, oh, that all that stuff happens, but you were 5 years in, and you were
I
still
was, yeah.
wrestling a little bit with that.
And up to that point, it really was me. And then, I had a bookkeeper. I had put on like an order manager. I just just really nipped at the edges, just kind of layered some people in that were, supporting the Landon show, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then it's like you get to that point where you're like, this needs to go beyond the Landon show. Like, it needs to be the
Yeah.
Goodson show.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's that one of those we call it the owner trap or the founder's trap that
yeah,
you gotta
yeah,
get past. And it's a tough one for a lot of founders because
Not easy. Yeah. And I'm not past it. I mean, I'll be honest with you, we're still not all the way through it. I mean,
oh
uh,
yeah, it's a
yeah,
journey.
it is very much.
So what about it are you wrestling with now?
I think for me, I'm realizing that it's, I mean, I question a lot, if I'm a great leader. I think one of the things I've learned is like there's a very big difference between being a sales and marketing guy and being able to hang your shingle and go get people to buy things from you, and then
Hmm.
but then building out a team and a company that can scale and execute on more and more of that's a completely different skill set. Motivating people, hiring people, motivating them, getting that machine to function efficiently and in the same direction is it's very
Yeah,
difficult. And there are certain people that are good at it, and there's certain people that aren't.
yeah,
So I think learning that that's not necessarily what I'm good at, and having to try to mature and develop those skills. And then the other thing I think is just probably a little bit more obvious, which is just the ability to trust people to do things.
mm,
And I heard somebody say, what is it? A lot of people the 80% out the door is better than 100% in the drawer. So it's like trying
yeah,
to excuse me, trying to get comfortable with the fact that nobody's going to necessarily be me, but if we can get somebody to 70, 80% of me, then that's pretty good.
yeah, yeah. And reality is we always think that those employees ought to love the business as much as we do, but the reality
Exactly.
is they don't. They're not bought in
Yeah,
at the same level. You can get them motivated to a certain point, you get them bought into a certain point, but at the end of the day, it's as my book title is, it's your baby, not theirs. And
that's right.
uh,
That's true. And
uh, so,
I think you make a great point. I think that's something. Again, I think it's one of those things that a lot of people would nod their head at and go, "Yeah," but there's a difference between head knowledge and heart knowledge. And I think, when you actually experience the thing and you see, like, oh, okay, like they don't care about it, and that doesn't mean that they're not great employees or great people or any of
sure.
that. It just means, like you said, it's not their thing. Like they're never going to care about it the way that I do, um, and that's just kind of the way it is. It's the way it's supposed to be. And then you got to figure out how to work within the confines of that and still find great people and treat them right and motivate them and so on.
Yeah, yeah. So you had this epiphany about 5 years ago. Decided to make it real. Decided to invest in more in marketing and step things up. You said a rebrand and some other stuff. So what's it been like since then? What's this journey been since you kind of did this reboot?
Yeah, so the big thing was, I mean, honestly, at that time there was just some really silly things. Like our website was not really, at that time, it was nothing but a scrolling flyer. Essentially, there was
Mm,
no. It was very difficult to post any content. Is what it was. I threw up a website when I started the business so that you had a web presence, and that was that. And the rest of it was just direct selling. And
mm,
so we had to redo the website, build it on WordPress so that we could create content, and, do things, put it on the website, link to it, all those kind of things. So some of it was very basic, just rebuilding, building a good foundation to be able to even generate content that you can put out there and see if people are even interested in it.
right.
I think the other part was we had added an intern. Like, so on maybe two or three different occasions, I've worked with U of L's a graduate program and brought in
Mhm.
an intern. And in this case, Ross, who is my operations manager, still with me today. He joined us in I want to say September of 2020 as an intern while he was wrapping up his master's, and then has stayed on. He stayed with me
Wow.
and has become kind of my right hand, in a lot of ways. And bringing him on, was a big step, and has helped us to, help me to have a person who can start to really, work on the operations side of the business where I'm not
Mhm.
as strong, and allow me to focus, try to focus on sales and marketing. And then from there, it was, then the next thing you know, you're getting larger. The phrase that I use a lot is velocity of money. So you get larger, you get more people, you get more things going on. So the money's moving faster
Yeah.
because you're paying more things and more people. And so then you got to try to get a little better at the finance part, and it's funny. It's like, it starts with sales and marketing, and then it kind of goes to operations, and then it goes to finance, and then you get all that fixed, and you really just go back and start again, and
Yeah.
you just keep kind of re-optimizing, up the chain. Um, and I would say that after that, it was really just trying to start to invest in the sales team, get some people involved, that could
Yeah.
start to help take care of customer day-to-day needs. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, and that's been kind of like just the movements in the last 5 years, and then I guess the last thing I'll say is that we're now strategically trying to bring in house control as much as we can in house. So you know,
Sure.
most companies in our space, they buy everything from third parties. That makes sense. Pins like this, nobody's making those things, but
Yeah.
clothing, they tend to send it out and it's embroidered by third parties. We're working on starting to bring that in house so we can control that more. Doing a lot of our own kits and packaging and things like that. So it's like we're just where we can, we want to bring things in house and can control them so that we can have more control over the overall customer experience.
Yeah. Cool. So I picked up on one of the things you said about that meeting you had with the judge back in
Yeah, right.
2020 was you felt you had something different to bring to the market. Uh, Define that, because like you said, it is a
Yeah,
crowded market. I can go out and there's 100 companies that send me emails every
yeah,
month on buying stuff from them. So
yeah.
how are you different?
I think that it starts with the brand itself. So it's not dissimilar from a lot of things in life. What do you see first? And we want people to see something that looks and feels different than any of the other companies they've seen in our space. And I think we've accomplished that for the most part. And then from there, it goes to how do you go about building relationship and providing an experience. And what we always say again, it's they don't have a product problem. I mean, you just said it. You're a Google search away or searching in your emails for more products than you ever want to look at.
Right.
The problem you've got, most people have, is not finding products; it's finding the right product
Mm.
um, for their brand, for the use case. For example, it's I want polos. It's obviously you could find thousands, hundreds of thousands of polos, but the question becomes, who do you want to give the polo to and why? And we talk a lot about this concentric circle idea. If you just focus on polos for a second, to where the closer the person getting the polo is to the company, they move the logo just like mine is here with a lot of contrast. If I start giving it to people who are not employees, like just stakeholders, board members, customers, you start moving a logo away from the chest, putting it on the sleeve, toning it down, going to where it matches the garment color.
Hmm.
And so it's the right products, and then it moves into how do I decorate those products with a little bit more of a view on strategically using those products. And I think the last point I'll make is that one thing we talk about internally a lot is there's just a lot of our industry at large. It's getting better, but our industry at large historically has not done a great job educating customers. It's almost done the opposite. Like they don't really want customers to know um, a lot of the inside baseball, if you will. They don't,
Yeah.
and we're trying to become one of the companies that's like, no, like we don't, we're not afraid to educate. I feel like there's always been a bit of an underlying fear in our industry. If I educate the customer too much, it makes them very portable. It makes them even more likely to not buy from
Right.
me. But there's a lot of information that just needs to be disseminated out to our customers. We're very committed to, we believe that if we become one of the best in our industry at educating customers on being better buyers, teaching them about all the different screen print methods, the pros and cons, what shirts can it be printed on and why, embroidery, why does some embroidery turn out well and why it doesn't, because it's
Mm.
based on stitch counts, based on what you're running it on. It's based on, you can even get to the point where you're talking about needle sizes and those kinds of things. So without getting too far into the weeds, the point is that's a big focus for us going forward, is trying to become a company that is seen as like, man, these guys are just sort of throwing the gates open and saying, we're going to try to bring you along. We're learning. We still believe, even to this day, even doing this as long as I have, I learn things all the time. So I'm like, hey, I'm on a journey to learn this business and we're going to help you learn it. And what we believe is if we do that, then people will buy from us. And they may not, but we still feel like it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you just kind of opened my eyes to. I just assumed you got a shirt, you had a sewing machine, and it just
Yeah.
put some thread in it, and off you
Yeah.
go. But
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. I mean, that's at a base level, we do that. That's
yeah.
that's what we do a lot,
But
but
there's a lot more that goes
there's
into
more,
it that people don't. Yeah.
yeah. As a matter of fact, we've been working on, just I'll allude to this a little bit. We've been working on more of like what I would call an agency approach to more of a structured and strategic approach to how companies use branded clothing and promotionals. Because a lot of companies, they just buy it because because everyone else has it. They think they need
Yeah.
it. I'm going to a
Yeah.
trade show, so I got to have a giveaway, whatever. And I think there's an opportunity to help companies kind of take more of an agency mindset, take more of a strategic approach to thinking about the stakeholder groups that they want to engage with merch or with branded clothing and promotional supplies, and then
Hmm.
think through not only who do I want to engage with these things, but why and what result am I looking for, and then how do I structure how I want to go about that, so
Yeah.
that when you go and buy the things, you don't just feel like, oh, I got to buy this thing and I need to drive the price down as low as possible. Frankly, if you're more strategic with it, this as well as anybody. If you're more strategic with it, you can be less price sensitive because you probably buy less anyway. But
Yeah.
you're going after something that's more effective. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's really, it's a great point. And it, helping your customers really, you're helping them spend their money more wisely,
right,
and that's only going to create more stickiness in your relationship, and they're going to stay with you
yeah,
versus the 1-800 number I call and order 100 more pins. um, I'm not gonna build a relationship with that person.
right. I mean, at the end of the day, businesses at a very basic level are trying to do two things. They're trying to increase revenue and cut costs, or contain costs, maybe a better way to say that.
Sure.
And if you can become a strategic part of helping companies do either one of those things, the sky is the limit, really. The challenge with our space is, no one has ever really taken that approach for the most part. And because it tends to be a transactional industry, in some instances, lower ticket, average ticket, no contracts, things like that, at least in the
Mhm.
mid tiers. You get really high in the food chain in our industry and there's contracts and things like that. But
Sure.
um, I think that there's just, I don't know if this will make any sense, but sometimes businesses, if you go to them and you try to talk to them about taking a strategic approach to something, if no one has ever done it before and they've never done it or they've never heard it, they're like, it can't be necessary, because if it was necessary, I would have done it. I would have heard of somebody doing it. And so that's that kind of
Yeah.
initial challenge of doing something new. And I'm not here to tell you that this thing is brand new, groundbreaking or anything, but I do think that companies could stand to think more strategically, and it's gonna be a challenge because their habits and even our habits are to just buy the thing and get it
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
And so it's going to take some work to go out and say, wait, let's pause and think through how we're using these things and why. And we may find that you can, like we just said, make better use of those funds.
Yeah. That's actually, that's a great point and a good learning, good takeaway from this. I'd like to pivot a little bit. I don't always get to talk about this on podcasts, but you opened the door earlier, talked about being a person of faith.
Yeah.
I am as well, and we've shared some of that in the past. But how has that helped you kind of weather some of the challenges of being a business owner? And how does it impact you just on a daily basis as a
Yeah.
business owner?
You know, I feel like I've been going through a really interesting season for probably the last 6 months of really learning a lot about what my relationship with the Lord looks like. And one of the real things that I feel like has been on my mind lately is I feel like the Lord has really been making it very clear to me that if he has a covenant with me, then everything that happens in my life crosses his desk. So much like, I'm not saying I'm Jesus, but there's a story of Jesus when he's like talking about Pilate and these guys, and he says, you have the only authority you have over me is the authority that's been granted to you by my Father, essentially.
Hmm.
The fact is that any of us that are in covenant relationship with God, it's the same thing. That things don't happen in my life that God doesn't allow to happen. And therefore, I got to really stop getting upset, depressed, sad, fearful, and all those things, and really pause and go, wait a second. I have a covenant relationship with God. This is happening to me. I don't like it. Maybe I'm angry about it. I'm frustrated. But if I'm angry and frustrated about it, I'm angry and frustrated with him. So I need to pause and start going, what is it that he's trying to teach me? What's he trying to develop in me? I mentioned that being a good leader from a team building standpoint is just not something I'm naturally good at. And so when I start to think about the fact that my life is directed in that respect, then the things that start happening, I'm trying to get better about how I handle them, how I respond to them. And I think that thing also, to your point, is very helpful to get through challenging times, because it's like,
Yeah.
okay, if my perspective is that God is allowing this, that this has crossed his desk, then
Yeah.
it has a purpose in my life.
Yeah.
And I need to spend more time figuring out what the purpose of this thing is and how
Yeah.
I'm going to get through it than how I feel about it. And it doesn't mean that I'm a robot. I still have feelings. Doesn't mean I don't feel angry or frustrated about it.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I agree. Yeah. And, I look at them usually as, what am I supposed to be learning from this? You
absolutely.
know, you know, I mean, this wasn't the way I planned this year is going, or this might, or how I planned this particular relationship to go, or whatever. But it must be something I'm supposed to learn out of this. And usually, I think there's always something to learn.
No
Uh,
doubt. Yeah.
and if you look at it from that standpoint, you tend to be able to get
Yeah.
through a lot of those tougher times.
I think I told you when we met that, I'm 44 now, and the older I get, it's not that I think I know more. I realize I know less. I mean, and that is a definitive statement that I can make. I mean, I definitely thought I knew more 20 years ago than I know
Oh
now.
yeah, yeah. I'd say there's a healthy humility that happens as we age, and
Yeah.
realizing that you can't do it alone
Yeah.
is one of the the most powerful learnings that I think I've had. And I appreciate you sharing that. I said I don't get to explore that every time with a podcast guest, but I know I could with you, and I appreciate
Yeah.
you sharing that. Let's as we kind of start to wrap up or wrap up, talk about where you see things going next. What's on the horizon for you, for Goodson?
Yeah. I think we've been wrestling with trying to make sure we really have a good understanding of our value proposition and what customer it fits well, what customers it fits well with.
Mm-hmm.
We're really trying to find some niche markets that maybe we've got some expertise in. I think in our space, it's very easy. I think in a lot of spaces really, but in our space especially, it's easy to get a mile wide and inch deep. You're doing things and you're selling things, but you're doing it for a very disparate group of customers, and there's not a clear value
Yeah.
proposition. And so we're really trying to hone in, and because I really do believe that we're living in a world where everything is at everybody's fingertips. And if you don't have a really good, clear value proposition and understanding of who that has value for, and deliver on that, then you're at risk. And so we're working on that. And then, like I said, we're very focused on, I would say the second thing is we're really trying to build out our sales team further. Um, I'm really trying to get myself to the point where I can have a really strong team to take care of the day-to-day needs of the customers we have, so I can move a lot more of my time into business development, nurturing those relationships and going and finding where we can bring more value. And I think the last thing I would say is we're really working hard to bring a lot of that in-house. I mean, we're trying to invest in equipment and people to take more and more control of the things that we're doing, because we believe really strongly that's going to the customer experience is super important, and the more we control, the better position we are to deliver really well on that.
Yeah. And you're able to serve people all over the country, right?
That's right.
You're
Yeah.
not just Louisville, Kentucky.
Right.
You're
Now, I will
serving.
say, in the sort of middle tier of our industry that we're in, people still tend to work with companies in their backyard. But to your point, we don't have to. We have customers all over the country, and a lot of those are relationships that either originated here or have some tie to here.
Sure.
And I still would say, a lot of our customers are in this sort of like Louisville, Lexington, Southern Indiana, E-Town, that kind of footprint. But yeah, absolutely, no limitation on where we can work.
Yeah. So that's awesome. Well, Landon, has been really great. Uh, just why don't you just share like one final word of advice, because you are an entrepreneur. I said at the beginning, you're very well respected as a person who's started your business here locally and done well. So what advice would you have to that person that's sitting where you were 10, 15 years ago, that's
Yeah.
thinking about taking that risk?
Yeah, I think, I hit on it a little bit there. I think that one of the things in hindsight that I probably, they say, what do they say? Spend more time sharpening the blade, kind of a thing. I didn't have a lot of options at that time. There was change happening that was out of my control and rapidly. So I sort of had to move quickly to go and sell. But I think there's a lot of value in, go back to having as much clarity as you can on your value proposition and the market that value proposition resonates with.
Mm-hmm.
There's a tendency sometimes to just run out and start selling.
Yeah.
Or just go get business.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for that. Believe me, it's valuable and it's necessary, and all the things are needed. But I've learned also, I think, as I've gotten older, that when you're young, you don't want to wait ever on anything. But sometimes waiting's okay. I mean, that's one thing I've learned with my relationship with the Lord is I've rarely found waiting in the context of my relationship with the Lord to be a bad thing.
Yeah.
Most of the time it gives him more room to help me. And I think the same thing is true in business. If I just even wait a little bit longer and just really, with the benefit of what I know in that moment, get really clear, what am I selling? What am I offering? Who am I offering it to? As narrow as possible, then go and
Yeah.
fight that urge to just run out and just sell it to anybody and everybody.
Yeah. That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. So if someone would like, I can see a couple, one, if someone's a really good salesperson and is looking for an opportunity, I'll vouch for you being a great guy to work with. And then, or two, if someone's looking for clothing or other paraphernalia, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can check. I'm on LinkedIn. Landon Wade at Goodson Clothing and Supply Co. And then at our website, goodsonsupplyco.com. That's really the extent of my presence online at the moment. I don't really get on the other platforms, but I always say, if I mapped every customer I have, and even the relationship with you, John, I know that there's just been a lot of connections that have led to other connections. So I'm open to coffees and getting together. And like you said, if you're looking for an opportunity, like the look of our brand and our space, give me a call or reach out to me, shoot me an email. There's a form on our website you can fill out, or my email, I'll just put it out there, is Landon, Landon at goodsonsupplyco.com, GOODSONSUPPLYCO.com.
Awesome. Well, Landon, thank you for sharing your story and opening up like you did. And I know it's inspirational for any young entrepreneur out there that might be looking at taking this similar kind of leap. So thanks for sharing.
John, thanks for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you liked it, please share or like it on whatever platform you use. You can find me on social media. On most platforms, I'm John K. Jennings. My first book is also available. Your Baby is Ugly tells you about 10 truths that business owners need to hear, but often won't, and how to overcome them. You can find it on Amazon. Just search for Your Baby is Ugly. And be watching for our next episode, where I'll interview another business owner who will share their stories and insights into what it's like to create a great business.